Eileen, welcome to the show, my friend. It's great to have you here, and I'm excited to dive into some really fun topics today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and as we just described, I don't get the opportunity to talk to a nuclear engineer or too often. So I want to just kind of start there just to pique my own interest, because obviously you've worked as a nuclear power plant engineer, as we were discussing in the introduction here. But I kind of want to hear a little bit about that experience, because I think that's something that for a lot of people is a big mystery. I think people kind of hear about nuclear, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it. I feel like people don't really know what actually goes on there. So I'd love to kind of know, what was your experience working in a nuclear power plant, and can that be done sustainably? Because I feel like we often hear the bad sides of nuclear without always talking about the good sides.
Well, I'm from Kennewick, Washington. And if a lot of people don't know, this is where, within 20 miles, they built the bomb. And unfortunately, when they did that, they just left a mess. This is the most contaminated place in the Western Hemisphere of the world. And of course, the race is to contain the nuclear waste, in originally single shell tanks, now double shell tanks are leaking. They're trying to glassify the waste. They've got multiple pumps along the river, over 100 gallons a minute each, pumping up groundwater and purifying it before it hits the Columbia River. This is a drastic health problem here. So I grew up here, and of course, they had not only all the abandoned plants from making the bomb and all the plutonium and things like that, but they had the Hanford Reservation, where the whoops, they call it, where, they mothballed all those nuclear power plants. And so after working for Rockwell Hanford out there, I started job shopping, where we were working at plants that were under construction. Okay, so there was a lot of design and inspection and things like that. And my specialty was quality assurance engineering. And I worked in Florida, California, Kansas, Texas, Illinois, and I worked a broad range of disciplines, from everything from pipe supports to hangers to instrumentation, to all this equipment. And one of the things people don't realize is these nuclear power plants are so overbuilt for earthquakes and all these scenarios. So when you put, a location in, there's tolerances, and then everything runs into each other. And so then you have to have design work changes and everything like that. I mean, when I worked in California at the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, it was just like, if you rejected something as an inspector, your car would be blown up. Or, it was like the craft ran wild. It was a time where, if you were a woman and you worked in the field, talk about harassment. It was horrible, and you had to be 10 times as good as any man at all, to do anything. And the last nuclear job that I worked at was at Comanche Peak, where, did statistical analysis, and, inspections weren't done like they were supposed to. So they would take populations of like every anchor bolt installed, every piece installed. And if any item failed within that population, then they'd have to do a total rework and things like that. And, I just really poured in to the paperwork and things like that. And, I found that, when you calibrate something, you're supposed to use for the depth with an ultrasonic device. If you're going to measure something that's supposed to be 2 inches long, you got to calibrate it to 2-inch block. Every single ultrasonic test ever performed at this nuclear power plant had not been calibrated right. So it's like, here I write this up, and they But they were like, that plant was great at wanting to do everything right, fix everything. And the best nuclear power plant that I ever worked at was in Kansas, Neustron, Wolf Creek. They actually now are setting records for maintenance and all kinds of things. There really needs to be a change in the construction, where you have small teams that go out and solve some of the problems, because these contractors, they were making cost plus 10. So, I mean, some of these were so crooked, like in Washington State, they would like tear out, the night shift would tear out what the day crew put in. And it was just like cost overruns. Yeah, but as far as nuclear power plants, there's no standardized design. There's boiling water reactors, there's SNUPs, closed loop reactors. And, obviously the older boiling water reactors have more potential, for problems. There's just a lot of design things, that we learned from Fukushima with these spent rods, and different stuff like that. Obviously, there has got to be, some improvement. And now there's designs of really small, compact nuclear power plant stations that maybe only supply power for a whole city, that are really, a leapfrog in evolution for safety. But people don't realize that every single nuclear power plant inside the containment dome, there's a pressure relief valve that's meant to release radiation. And, there's just a lot of things inherent in these designs that, I mean, if we got rid of every nuclear power plant, let me tell you, wind and solar just aren't going to give us what we need.
Right.
And now a lot of places, like Germany's almost closed down every nuclear power plant. But what are they doing now? They're firing up coal-fired plants to feed the electric vehicles.
Right.
So, I mean, there has to be a balance here. And I think the pendulum swung way too far, because yeah, Fukushima, that those issues need to be addressed at any, nuclear power plant along, dangerous waters and things like that. And they need to be doing something different with the spent fuel rods than what they are. But all in all, it is pretty darn safe as far as emissions, as far as, the safety shutdowns and the valves, and the redundancy of systems is unbelievable. I mean, that's why they're so expensive to build. So I would be a proponent in favor of doing the smaller sealed units, that the safety, I mean, they've been doing it in other countries now for quite a while, that would really be helpful. But I don't think it's helpful when you consider where you have to bury the windmill blades and
Right.
all the different costs and the subsidies that went into it, and they're just not generating the megawatts, of power that we need. And I think individual homeowners should be getting into, solar panels and different things. But then we have waste disposal on the solar panel problems.
Right.
It's just really hard to have the perfect solution. I mean, I really like the fourth phase of water, and I'd like to see some research gone into that, because Dr. Gerald Pollack found out that you can take water and put a negative and positive electrode in there and shine 3,000 nanometers of light on there, and it'll generate more power than it took to shine the 3,000 nanometers of light on the water and to store energy in water. I think that there's going to be some inventions that come out that are going to really take us out of this quandary that we're in right now.
For sure. And, I think that, like you mentioned with the solar, it's a great step in the right direction. But for me, anytime we're dependent on one thing, I'm always a little skeptical because what if that one thing now doesn't work, or some bad players get control over that one electrical grid unit that we're creating? Then what happens? Then what happens if we monopolize the entire electrical circuits and now it costs, $1,000 to just heat your home or, use your electricity every month? So I think that anytime we get into one size fits all, it becomes a very slippery slope. And so I think that there's obviously we hear the horror stories of nuclear, but the more I learn about it, I think there's also a lot of potential in there. And I think since these Fukushimas and these other, nuclear waste projects we've had essentially is we've made a lot of improvement. And so now it's a matter of can we use this new technology to find a balance that we're not so dependent on one side and not utilizing the other. And so, obviously for you saying that you are a proponent of, smaller scale nuclear or smaller operations of nuclear, but you've had some side effects of working at a nuclear power plant. I'm curious as to how those two pieces interact. Is it just the fact that the one you were on wasn't sustainable? And I'm also curious, were other people working at the same plant getting sick as well?
Well, when you're an inspector and you're in the field, or if you're an engineer and you're checking on stuff, you're around welding fumes, you're around chemicals. And back then, we don't have the standards now that we do, where people are wearing hoods and having fresh air pumped in. This is back when, who cares almost? Let's get the job done. And so there's a lot less occupational exposure than when I was out there. So a lot of the construction type exposure has been eliminated. In Washington State, when my mom was here, they were releasing radioactivity in the air, just straight in the air. And it's like here, we have more thyroid disease than anywhere in the world, and also underactive thyroid, because it's like then, your parents, so then you're born with, weaker thyroid and all of that. And so it's occupational exposure. Nowadays, there's a lot more regulations, protecting that. But back then, it's like I grew up, my dad had a motorcycle shop, and that's when we had leaded gasoline. And I remember all the exhaust fumes in the repair shop. I used to think it smelled good, and just so think of all the lead,
Right.
it's like we've come a long way.
For sure.
But as far as nuclear, there's just a lot of different chemicals that they use in piping systems that are pumped to do this, to neutralize that, and everything like that. And so when you're out there in construction and doing inspections, when there wasn't like odor control, when there wasn't, that kind of thing in place, you're going to have the exposure just during construction of building it, not of it operating.
Gotcha.
So as far as the operating portion, there's a lot of things that have to be maintained and changed, and there's risk for that, but there's protective equipment now. So, I didn't want to be an inspector in a hot nuclear power plant and wear my dosimeter and go in and get my dose of radiation, so I mainly worked, other than the mess out there that was created with the bomb. I work with the effluent control group. So our job was actually identifying all the toxic waste that was created. Literally there were train tunnels where we had records, unclassified, of course, that, they were just storing uranium in cardboard boxes. So now they build robots to go in, and do different things. But yeah, today is a whole different ballgame than our history.
Cool. Well, you're talking about, toxic chemicals, breathing these things in. I know a topic that you're very interested in. I'm very interested in, is that of oxygen and air quality in general. So I'd love to just kind of have you dive into, how you keep your house and wherever you go, how you keep that high quality air going, how you build a holistic home, and just the little oxygen miracle, I think is what you called it.
Yeah. Well, our single most impactful exposure to anything is what we breathe, because we do that more than anything. We do that more than we drink, more than we're touching things. We have all these pathways to get good things into our body, like oxygen and negative ions versus toxins. I mean, it's common knowledge. The EPA says that indoor air is 3 to 5 times more toxic than outdoor air. And part of the problem with our conditioned living spaces that we have are heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. They have ductwork, they have an intake, they suck the air, they circulate air through the house, which, the EPA says that if you can increase air circulation, you can decrease respiratory distress from the contaminants, within the home. But part of that recirculation strips the air of negative ions. And people don't realize that our body has this threshold of a minimum amount of negative ions that it needs to function. Just like we have a minimum amount that we need of oxygen, we have a minimum amount we need of water for our bodies to function. And
Eileen, real quick, can you just tell people what negative ions are and how those work for anybody that's not familiar?
sure, well, in nature, there's always positive and negative. And so there's invisible particles, that you see in the air, and there's negative ones, and they attract the harmful positive ions. And it's nature's way of cleaning up outdoors, and weather affects that. You're going to have more negative ions, after a rainstorm. That fresh smell also has, oxygen in it and things like that. And it's just nature's cleanser. But, like our computer screen, it's emitting poisonous positive ions. And if we don't have a certain amount of negative ions per cubic centimeter, that's the size of a sugar cube, that we're inhaling, our body is going to be fatigued. We could have headaches, so somebody who's like indoors, especially with COVID now, more people have been indoors. And then, the formaldehydes and the benzenes and ammonias and all the stuff emitting off of our furniture, our draperies, our carpets, and all that kind of stuff, then, you can have all kinds of symptoms and not even realize it. You can go on the Health and Human Services website and look up all these health conditions that are associated with contaminated air. I mean, I just read a study from cities where people were inhaling more contaminants in their air just because of the smog and, traveling in and out of the city. They found out that city dwellers have more of the bad kind of fat, than someone who's not breathing that. So the air can be affecting your body composition, your overall health, a lot of things. And so early on, because I used to be allergic to everything. And I mean, if somebody had cologne on or some smell of a soap or anything like that, I mean, my lungs would begin to close up. I had to have an EpiPen. I was allergic to every food. I had to eat a food and wait 72 hours before I could eat it again, because I would just become allergic to everything I ate, until I found out about leaky gut and what was really going on there to be able to heal myself of the allergies. But I learned, before you could go to the grocery store and buy either, I don't know, 7th generation or Granny's old soap or, all of these non-toxic brands now that you could go and buy. I mean, I had to come up with my own, making different things and using, so clean up what you're emitting in your home environment first place, with your cleaning chemicals, your body care products. It's typical for a woman, between all the stuff that they put on their skin and in their hair, to be exposed to over 500 chemicals. And when you put it on your skin, so clean up the stuff that's emitting odors in your own home, and then go to hard surface if you can. And not everybody can afford, tile or, wood flooring with non-toxic stains and, like Rubio oil that doesn't emit, VOCs. Nowadays, you can buy VOC paint, but there's also a special shampoo you can get with a sealer and a lock that literally, if you have brand new carpet that, is giving you a headache because of all the chemicals, you can seal all that. And in a 2-day process, the outgassing is completely taken care of. There's no air purifier known to man that could keep up with the outgassing of new carpet in a home. And I mean, not everybody can afford wool carpet, because you can buy wool carpet that doesn't have, emitting of that. And then, circulation does help. So, go over to your thermostat and cause your circulating fan, instead of to come on and off when you either are cooling or heating, have it go continuous. And people are going, oh my gosh, the power. No, it draws very little voltage, and you'll have voltage spikes in usage in electrical power when the fan turns on and off more than just consistently. Your fan will actually last longer because it's not hammering the windings. And that will really improve, along with how many people regularly change their furnace filter. I mean, come on, guys, changing that, now we've got reminders on our smartphones. We've got habit reminders, man. Set a reminder and change your furnace filter. And you would be shocked at how much better, that makes your indoor air environment. However, I got tired of all these air purifiers that are noisy, that have to have expensive filters. So I came up with, and we're sedentary, we're indoors, we have the lower negative ions, we have the lower oxygen levels. So I wanted to, come up with something different than everyone else, because you can always, there's so many different air purifiers that you can get, and some of them are good and helpful and great. But I came up with something new, using plasma. Now everybody's familiar maybe with a negative ion generator, but plasma takes it to a next level. It's like the LAX airport uses giant plasma air purifiers to get rid of the toxic jet fumes. Because if you've gone through their concourses lately, you'll notice that the airport sure smells a lot better. And so plasma is something really important. And so I actually was having a lucid dream when I was on an airplane and saw this little tiny mini device. And I saw other people coughing and hacking and getting sick. And then I was breathing safe. So I described what it looked like to my engineer. And we came up with this little device that emits 19,100,000 negative ions and 4,550,000 positive. That's what makes it plasma, when it has both negative and positive. So it's like this ionic cloud that's constantly having these reactions. It's like priming the pump. So it's cleaning the air of all kinds of volatile organic compounds and dust particles that are so small that it will make it through a HEPA filter, and leaving over a bunch of negative ions. And this little device is capable of running off of a battery pack that you charge your tablet or your phone with. So you can go mobile with this. And that's part of the reason why what I told the engineer is that it had to run off of one of those. And so this actually, off of a 20,000 milliamp hour battery bank, will run 72 hours continuously. I actually put one of these in my hyperbaric oxygen chamber. So so I'm getting negative ions because hyperbaric strips the air of negative ions. And then I had this family that were asthmatics, and they just said, Eileen, I just sniff above that device and I don't have to use my inhaler. And so I was like, I set it off for lab testing, to put it on the floor, measure up to my nose when I'm in the sauna. How many negative ions am I really, with what's left over, am I inhaling? Which turns out to be 56,000 negative ions per cubic centimeter. It takes 30,000 or 20,000 per cubic centimeter in a sauna to cause your sweat volume to double, according to European studies. So there's huge benefits to using this in a sauna, besides the fact I started thinking about that toxic humidified sauna sweat I was rebreathing. So this, cleans all that up. But I sent it back to the lab because I'm like trying to figure out, why is this working for people with sleep apnea or asthma to where they're instantly able to breathe? And turns out that not only is it ionized clean air, it's increasing background oxygen levels 70 to 118%. So all this yoga, breath work, get more oxygen, man, your hack is keep one of these close by. But I have them, all over the house. And as far as pathogens goes in the air, it's pretty good. I mean, but it's only like 48%. I mean, a lot of the air purifiers you get, the reason why they're better at cleaning pathogens out of the air is because of the filtration media that they go through. I mean, that has no filter. You just take a brush and you clean it. So one of my son's college roommates always had these Glade Airwicks plugged in when I'd go visit. And I would just be choking, knowing that the chemicals in there are listed on the Health and Human Services website as carcinogenic.
Yep.
And here it's just like everywhere. Oh my
Yep.
gosh. So I used to have this LED light that cleaned the air. You could hold a cigarette up to it and the smoke would just disappear. So I said, I don't want an LED light. Even it had a healthy CRI rating, but people are so scared of LED lights that they don't look that you can have a healthy CRI rating that's not going to damage your eyes. But anyway, so I abandoned that and went to the ionic refresher and just put the technology in here without a light. And you can hold a cigarette up to this and the smoke will just disappear. But this little gizmo, when I tested it, because of these metallic impregnated fibers in this tip, kill 89% of pathogens in the air. And I mean, the only maintenance is, wipe it off about once a month. That's it. And it's silent. So what I use for my home is I basically bought a 12 pack of these home and plugged them in everywhere around the house. And then I have breeze safes pretty much everywhere. And then I have my furnace fan on continuous and I change my filter like once a month. So that's, besides using non-toxic cleaners and laundry soap. Putting that up against your skin, use wool dryer balls in the dryer. So you're not using the dryer sheets to put all that to absorb in your skin. We have a lot to think about besides just what we breathe, but what's on our skin and how we can, improve our health.
100%. Yeah. And that's something that I often talk about with, water filtration is our showers is so many times we're doing all these great things. We're taking great water, but then we go into the shower and we're absorbing fluoride, chlorine, all these different chemicals. So, and a lot of people say, it's a lot, and it is a lot. It is a lot of little things, but I tell people, start with one step at a time. For me, it's like, all right, instead of wearing synthetic clothing that has all these chemicals, try to get your undershirts with organic cotton, or, make one shift at a time and make it sustainable. Because if you try to upheave everything, one, it's stressful. Two, it costs a lot of money. And then you may just say, hey, this is too much, and then you quit. So how can we start these little incremental things? And I think a big thing, like you said, is especially for women, using a lot of different perfumes and, hair. I don't even know all this stuff, hair stuff, and, all these different chemicals that are going on their bodies. And it's right there, like you said. And then especially, you're breathing that stuff in, it's on you all day. It's absorbing into your skin, absorbing into your hair, absorbing into your nails. So how can we make these little tiny shifts? And that's what it is a bunch of tiny shifts. And I think that it can be easy to be overwhelmed by thinking we do everything all at once. So I like the fact that you said, like, hey, let's start by getting down some fragrances. If you got something plugged in the wall that's shooting out fragrances, let's cut that out real quick. pull that out and just throw it in the trash. Deodorant is another big one that I think is very overlooked, is, using a non-toxic deodorant. Aluminum is common in these fragrances. And what do we got going on there?
We have a whole skincare line,
You
of
do.
course.
Cool.
5-star reviews, every single one of them. We started out with deodorant because no matter what natural deodorant my daughter or I used, you still smelled. I mean, who's got one that works, right?
I'll tell you, it took me years, because it was the same. I was trying brand after brand. And I finally just recently got one. So I'm going to have to check out the ones that you have too.
Yeah, we have and ours are based, our ancestral products, because we render kidney fat. A cow, grass fed, we can't get enough organic, but we use like other organic ingredients. But, a cow could have 300 pounds of fat, only maybe 15 to 20 pounds on top of the kidneys in that fascia sac. Because you've, seen a lot of tallow products online, maybe bought them, and you smell like you just cooked a hamburger. How can you wear that around, right? And so we came up with this process of rendering that takes about a week. And then out of the amount of fat that we buy, we end up with 25%. So it's a very expensive, long drawn out process, and it's hard, to source. We're in with some farms, a group of farms, in the Pacific Northwest that are just grazing. They're not giving them any hormones or shots or anything like that. And so we render our tallow, but we have 2 deodorants, lemon lime and fresh. And there's only in the last 5 years, only been one person that it didn't work for, but they could not have any at all baking soda. There's a very minute amount in here. Everyone else that said, well, I can't have baking soda on my skin, have tried it and haven't had a problem. I've only had one that couldn't. Other than that, 5-star reviews. Then because I'm going to be 60 years old, look at my videos from 5-10 years ago and look at me now. It's because of all the prototyping and developing this natural skincare. We've got toners with Dead Sea minerals and all kinds of stuff. Because I got tired. I was buying from Macy's the Origins brand, where you get a little tiny thing like this for $60, and stuff like that. So I developed a facial toner that works better, body toners, and then we have lotions. We've got sunscreen, we've got cellulite rejection, we've got balms. But I even have a review from a person who's a vegan who tried absolutely everything under the sun and had such a horrific skin condition that she was desperate. So she tried one of the products and it fixed her. So, yes, they're not vegan. I had one person ask me, well, did the cow have to die? And yes, unfortunately, it was slaughtered and we used the kidney fat. But there's a lot of oil soluble vitamins and everything like that. If you ever just accidentally get some butter on your skin, you notice how it just kind of absorbs in there. This just goes into the deeper layers and rejuvenates. And we put some pretty darn expensive ingredients in these. But yeah, that reduce all kinds of stuff. So I would just encourage people, and they smell nice. We don't overpower the formulas with essential oils. The essential oils that we choose are for healing and rejuvenating purposes. And a lot of the aroma comes from the organic oils that we put in there. But you'll find that you smell this stuff and your body just craves it because it's got natural healing properties. So we're developing several other products. Like I actually use the anti-cellulite cream on a Q-tip and I put it around my eyes if there's any puffiness, and it kind of shrinks it back.
Hmm.
So we're working on a cream, an anti-aging cream for the eyes, and using some peptides, because I'm doing a lot of research on peptides. There's wonderful things that help the body rejuvenate with that. And then we're going to come out with an acne cream. We do have a lot of ingredients in the healing lotion that work for acne, rosacea, psoriasis, a whole bunch of things like that. And they're all low PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acids. We now know that a lot of our problems are these seed oils.
Yes.
So they say that if you're a 10 PUFA or less, that's okay. So, I think our highest one is like 6, so we have considered that, and almost all the ingredients are organic and they actually work. So like I said, the 5-star reviews tell the story.
Yeah, you mentioned the seed oils there, and that's a big, big gripe of mine that I'm always talking about people. I put out a couple posts recently about that, and like 5 alternatives to coke or canola oil was a popular one, and then also too there was some studies I was seeing that basically were saying that people that consume the standard American diet, and a lot of that being tracked towards seed oil consumption, have a much higher risk of skin cancer, sunburns, all these other type of negative side effects from the sun. And here we are blaming the sun, but when people stop consuming these seed oils, the sun is giving life to every single thing on this planet. And so it's always fascinating to me to see these type of studies that I've found, for me as somebody, pretty light-skinned dude, most of my life I get pretty burned. And as my nutrition has improved, I don't really get burned that often. And I think part of that is also, I'm more mindful of not just laying out in the sun for 4 hours straight and not taking any sort of break, but between hydrating better, between higher quality nutrition. Sometimes I'll use a little bit of coconut oil, and I haven't really had any issues with burning, but I think it's a very interesting topic to dive into, those seed oils. And you also mentioned about the vegan pushback, that I think that there's, obviously this big movement right now. And my background is in sustainable food and farming from my undergrad. And there's this really big misconception that animals, especially cows, are the worst thing to ever walk this
Oh
planet,
my
when in
gosh.
fact it's just about the complete opposite, that they're really sequestering carbon in the soil. And if we can
So you saw the
utilize
TED talk on that? That is phenomenal, where they killed all the elephants and then they bring in cattle and it just completely redid the land because it's sequestering carbon.
it's amazing. And I think that it's this I don't want to get conspiratorial, but I think there's a lot of plant-based companies out there that are pushing some science that is definitely in their favor, as opposed to saying, hey, maybe the cows used in a sustainable manner. We're looking at the studies from, like feedlots, and obviously,
Right,
if you're
right,
using data from an unsustainable model, yeah, you're gonna show results that show it's not
right.
good. But if you use a sustainable farm, that's a whole different story. And so, what I also like about what you're saying about using this kidney fat is that most people, when they're consuming animal products, are just using the major muscle areas. They're not going into these little areas. And that's, for me, I'm a big fan of organ meats. I think,
Oh yeah, yeah,
liver is one
absolutely
of the most nutrient dense
true.
foods on the planet.
Yes.
And so for me, it's like, all right, so yeah, maybe having an animal just using major parts isn't the most sustainable. But if we use all the different pieces of the animal, that's what has been done ancestrally since the
Nose
dawn of
to
time.
tail.
Nose to tail, exactly. And I watched this hunting show. It's called Meat Eater. It's actually a really good show on Netflix. And this guy, he goes out and hunts, and like he's talking about how you can eat like the fat behind the eyeballs, and like all these like little random things that you never really think of as an average person. But there's so many incredible benefits when we do use that nose to tail model.
Right. Well, another comment I think that's tied to skin cancer is the use of sunglasses
Yes.
because
All
of
right, go
blocking the
off on this
hormone.
one.
And, with being light skinned, if you get out, well, the Calvins in the sunlight are low in the morning, you can like develop what you call a skin callus
Mhm.
towards not burning as much. But if you do have to be out in the sun, we have a completely non-toxic skincare, sunscreen. A little dab will do you. Oh my gosh. And it's an SPF 35. So,
Mm.
we've tried to come up with healthy alternatives, for that.
I love it. Yeah, the sunglasses is a big one too. I stopped wearing sunglasses probably 4 or 5 years ago. So I remember
Yep.
seeing a post on Instagram. One of my mentors is talking about, stop using sunglasses. It's terrible for your eyes, your circadian rhythm, your skin,
Oh
all these
yeah.
different things. And
All your hormones. And
yep,
we've
yep,
just have the 21st century disease. We're indoors, we're
right.
not getting the sun, we're not getting the grounding, we're not breathing what we should, we're putting all this stuff on our bodies. It's just amazing how much someone could feel better just by getting out, watching the sunrise barefoot
Yep,
in the morning for a month.
yep.
Their sleep will improve like so much. It's
Well,
amazing.
well, I'll tell you, it's funny when I'm working with clients, doing one-on-one coaching, and some of my first suggestions, all right, when you wake up, go for a little barefoot walk to your backyard, sit in the sun for 5 minutes. And it's like little things that when they come to me as a health coach, they're expecting nutrition and,
How
exercise.
much money do I have to buy this?
Right. Yeah.
Do that. There's like so much you can do for free.
Right. And that's what I think is, I always recommend, there's so many great gadgets out there. I'm a big fan of using, supplements in a proper way. I'm a big fan
Yep.
of using things like air filters and all these things we've talked about. But what if you just started by going outside, breathing fresh air, getting in the sun, going for a walk, free things. And then the other things are the icing on the cake. But if you're not keeping your basics down pat, you can buy the fanciest gadgets in the world. And yeah, you may see some results, but you're not going to be optimized. You got to balance the gadgets with the basics. And I think that's a big thing
Right.
that I'm a big proponent of in this. Biohacking has become such a, I don't even know how big of an industry it's going to become in 10 years, probably many billion-dollar industry. But those are all great, but let's balance that with returning to our roots. What were our ancestors doing? And obviously now we've learned more than them. Their life expectancy was like 40 years old, and we're a little bit beyond that. So it's find what worked and also find what's working with our technology and find that middle ground where we can now blend the two together. And I think that's what I find so fascinating about, the things that you've shared with your technology, your products. A lot of things that I'm often talking about is it's a blend of the two. It's not all, I think that tends to be, we love to be one side or the other in our society nowadays. It's like you're either this side or that side. It's like, what about something in the middle? Because I think there's a little bit of good on both sides.
I'm one of the things, I'm a gadget woman, and so I buy and try so many things. And, if it's not easy to use, where does all that stuff go? In your garage or the
Right.
next yard sale, and you
Yep.
don't even use it. So one of the things of my company that I've tried to do is to design products that are easy to use, to put in your lifestyle, that give kind of like an immediate payback, meaning the person feels better. They're encouraged to do more. I always say that if, somebody asks me, I'm only going to do one thing for my health, what do I do? I'd say do a daily coffee enema. And then I give them my reasons why. And, of course, I am a proponent of doing near infrared saunas and drinking ozonated water, obviously going outside, doing the free things. But, doing stuff that helps me. And one of my passions, I've got 10 patents and 5 of them relates to your structure, your posture. It's huge. People don't realize how much energy their body consumes just holding yourself upright in gravity. And every time somebody has a tight muscle, it's horrible that you see people reaching for, anti-inflammatories, muscle relaxers, or even, I think it's better using the CBD and the THC for the pain, but I want to get at the root.
Right.
And bottom line, our spine is a mechanical device, kind of like a crankshaft in a motor. If you have a bent crankshaft, man, that motor's going to seize up, things are going to wear, and all these tight muscles and everything like that is an emergency protective mechanism so your body doesn't drift further. And, a lot of people don't know this. I mean, I was born and the doctor grabbed me and twisted me, yanking me out with forceps. And of course, my parents didn't know to take me to a chiropractor then. And my body was twisted and I had to wear special shoes. And every time I walked, my right knee jammed into my left knee. I mean, I just physically wasn't very good at, running, jumping, anything like that. And then I grew 9 inches in 3 months. If you can just imagine the horrific pain. And then I got ran over by a car in a parking lot. I mean, every single breath was like a dagger to my heart. And then I became acquainted with the chiropractor who thought that we needed to have an ideal shape in gravity. So his training, his treatment, everything was to give you back the shape that you either didn't acquire or you lost.
Mm.
And he ended up working with the New England Patriots and the US Olympic team and had a whole team of people and developed equipment. And then he passed away. And so I've improved his equipment and, there's basically 4 simple things people can do to get that shape of the spine, which you can't change the muscle attachment points on bone. So these tight muscles and the ligaments and the damage to your fascia and all of that, we're not exercising, inducing curvature and improving the multificus interspinalis, so we have these vertebrae that if we have the right shape, the shear forces of gravity will lock our bone on bone, the back, those facet bones, that you're not going to have a dislocation. And so there's a whole new product line. So far, we've got 34 products and there's more. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more products. So we're going to have a whole spinal fitness line to address these issues. And we're working with basically professional athletes who are seeing tremendous results that they don't get anywhere else. So it's going to help increase athletic ability, minimize injuries, and speed recovery.
Love
But
it.
yeah.
Well, like you're saying is that, the force of gravity is holding life together, but also if you got a forward head posture, even just by a couple inches, that's a lot of pressure on the back of your neck. And even me sitting at a computer, that slight hunch, even after, like, now I'm more aware of it. So after like 30 minutes, it's like, oh man, like I can't imagine doing that before. And then, I tell people like, hey, if you work a desk job, which a lot of people do, hey, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life, but if that's the career you've chosen, get up and move your body at least every hour. I would say preferably a little bit more, but if you can get up at least once an hour and just to walk to the bathroom and back, reset your spine, like stand up straight. I like to lay on the floor, like a hard surface, lay down flat, do a little stretching, like get the body back into alignment, because when we're out of alignment with our bone structure, our muscular structure, everything else is going to suffer. Our breath is going to be stifled. We're going to be breathing more shallowly, probably into the chest, activating that sympathetic nervous system, stimulating inflammation. The list goes on and on. And so then it comes down to, again, returning to our roots. How can we just get back to our basic healthy posture? And I think that that for a lot of people is moving more, doing more things like walking, doing more things like stretching, and actually being mindful of their little postures. And if you're having your hand up here when you're typing with your mouse, bring the mouse down lower. And like we're saying with the household things earlier, it's a lot of little things.
Right.
If you're looking down at a computer, raise it up a little bit, have it a little bit higher, little things, and that can make the world of a difference. And then I know I want to kind of dive into your tools you got going on, because I'm a big fan of foam rollers. I'm a big fan of, you know, massage guns, and like you're saying, all these little gadgets, that lacrosse balls, golf balls that we can just use to kind of reset that musculature. But would like to just kind of close up here with all the tools you have for spinal support, and where people can learn more about all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, we have the neck shaper. There's a neck flexion exercise that you can do. And because of all of our electronic devices, I wanted to start with the neck, because a lot of pain going through your arms and even your low back curve are affected by your neck. And a lot of people do stretching because of tight muscles. But unless you have force on top of your body, that's called anterior force, with posterior support, like a train has a train track. Okay. So if you want your bones to be in a certain way, you have your posterior support guiding. You know, a lot of these foam rollers out there, they crunch the spinous and the transverse process. It doesn't stretch the joint. A lot of times it's painful. I mean, heck, there's that chirp roll. People are falling off of that thing and injuring themselves. And, you know, foam rollers are great for releasing fascia and, you know, tight muscles. But what about inducing the curvature? That type of behavior does not induce curvature. So with the neck shaper, you're able to put that force, the anterior force, and with the rolls, the posterior support with the groove, because it lets the spinous float. And then the edges of your vertebrae are called transverse process. And so you'll literally be adjusting your back while you're using, you know, this equipment, and it's stretching the joint. I mean, you have hundreds of joints in your spine. And like you said, the muscles are suffering, the range of motion, all these things. But what people don't realize is that through your brain and your spinal cord, through every joint where the nerves go out to supply, you know, impulses to the organs. So when you have these pinched organs, you're going to have less organ function. And so when you use the rolls, then you're able to stretch that. It releases nerve impulses. But one of the things we teach is to do the back twist, you know, to sit up straight and lead and rotate, because your discs are like a sponge. What we want to do with this rotation is we want to change the state to a jelly. Then you use these different rolls. You know, we have 5 different diameters, 3 different densities of each. So it depends on how flat your back is, or how injured you are, how athletic you are. We have a sizing kit so you can determine the right size. Then you put one in your low back and one behind your neck, and you lay down on the ground, like you talk about laying down flat. Well, what this does, then you lay there for 20 minutes. And so now gravity, all those tight muscles relax. Literally, you're here, your bones moving. And then your discs turn back to the sponge state. You can roll off, get up, and it's like encouraged your spine to use that curvature. It begins to train you. And because of the 5 different diameters and 3 different densities, and some of the other exercises that we teach, which are all in PDF free guides that they can go, like spinalfitness.com, it forwards it to the website, and you can get all that for free and utilize that to reduce pain. I mean, there was one kid who had a trampoline accident and he'd been through physical therapy and he was having seizures. And I had these prototype ugly duckling, you know, cushions. I mean, they were like really bad. These are the finished nice product. And, you know, I taught him how to do the back twist and lay down. And a month later, his dad came back and said he's never had a seizure since. And that kid carries those rolls with him everywhere and uses them faithfully every day. And I mean, it's just amazing. And right now we have the power cushion. The molds are being cut right now with the integrated neck shaper. That's what the New England Patriots have. Their players, you know, on. And that's how they can do the pelvic tilt and a real sit up where you're arching over so that you're strengthening the multifidus and the interspinalis muscles and inducing the curvature. Because, you know, football players that have that big low back, they're the ones that are the best. They can run faster, jump higher, hit stronger. And so, you know, we've got these proven exercises and the equipment to be able to give you the curvature. And that's, you look at every Olympic athlete, you just see they have that big low back curve and they have that curve and they just have this natural stance. It's a reminder to stand up straight isn't going to give you the opposing force to induce curvature. So that's why we need the exercises. There's a pelvic tilt, a setup, and the neck flexion. And then there's the twist to lay over the cushions. You can drink ozonated water to get the miracle of more oxygen in your body. There's just, you know, just everything. And we're constantly coming up with things to maximize your energy and your health.
Eileen, this has been a lot of fun. I definitely had some good questions answered, and I learned a lot of good things. So I'm excited for people to be tuning into this and follow along with all the cool stuff you're doing. So I appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And everybody listening, have an amazing day, and we'll see you soon.